Can the police lie to a suspect to get evidence against them? You'll be amazed how many people don't know the answer to this. It was a question I often got when I was a lawyer in both the prosecutor's office and a private defense attorney, as well as a federal inmate, where you'd be astonished how many people were actually there because the police had lied to them. But this isn't the only question that needs to be asked and answered. Equally as important, if not more important, can the evidence they get from their lies be used against you? In a search warrant, they need to have probable cause to be able to search. If they don't, and they find a piece of evidence, then that evidence and everything thereafter is called fruit of the poisonous tree. They are not allowed to use it, and after a motion to suppress, the judge can rule against the prosecution, suppress that evidence, and it cannot be used. A final question that needs to be asked and answered is, if you lie to the police, you, not them to you, if you lie to them, can you be prosecuted? What can happen to you? As always, I like to use illustrations, examples, a story to get my point across. And this story was from back when I was in the district attorney's office. I had a case where there was a body, and at this stage of the case, we didn't know if it was a homicide, if it was a manslaughter, an accidental death. We didn't know the cause of death because it was the night that it happened. But they had one suspect in protective custody who was down at the police station, and they were interrogating. Now, technically, this person was under arrest. They weren't free to leave. So therefore, if they're in custody, they're supposed to be Mirandized. No questions are supposed to be asked of them until they're given their rights against self-incrimination. And that's all for another video. In this particular case, the police had this gentleman in the room, and I had been called to the scene. There was a body, so we had a dead person. I was called to the police station to help conduct this interview. And really, I was just there overseeing it. They had the suspect at a table, and they had two police officers in the room. First off, right off the bat, the police are telling him that they have his friend under arrest in the other room, and he's already given this man up. There's no reason to lie. If you get in first with a deal, they're telling him, then it'll be better for you. There was nobody in the other room. They didn't have anybody under arrest. They didn't have another suspect. They had nothing whatsoever. But they were trying to trick this guy into admitting that he did something. And in this case, it was simply moving the body. He did not commit a homicide. He and another guy had moved the body, but we didn't know that then. We're in the process, and me too. I'm completely at fault here too. I was encouraging them to lie because we wanted to solve this case. That's what you do as a prosecutor. That's what you do as police. But the difference is police aren't held to the same code of ethics that lawyers and judges are. Police can, will, and most of the time do lie to suspects to get more evidence against them. If they're telling you, make it easier on yourself by giving a confession, what that means, what should go off in your head, is they don't have enough to fucking arrest me, or they would. If you're not wearing handcuffs, they're not going to be asking these questions. If you were wearing handcuffs, they have plenty to arrest you. You'd be under arrest, and they wouldn't be asking you any questions whatsoever. So here's this guy, and he didn't believe that his friend was in the other room and had ratted on him. The police weren't done. They were not even by a long shot. At the table in this interrogation room, and there was one-way glass, so I could have been standing outside, but I was actually in the room while they were conducting this interview. In the center of the table, they had on like a light stand, a light bulb. So it was just a light bulb in the center of the table. And if you looked underneath the table, the wires would have come through, and then across to where the police officer was sitting was a switch. They had these alligator clamps, and they told the suspect that this was a lie detector test that they had. And they put the alligator clips on the tips of his index finger. And they started asking him questions. Really, they were cross-examining. They were giving him the answers they wanted. Isn't it true that you killed this guy? Isn't it true that you moved his body and threw it in the dumpster? Every time he would deny, they would flip the switch. The light bulb would go on, and they'd start yelling at him, "You're fucking lying." Well, the other cop who wasn't sitting at the table with the light switch had a phone book. He'd hit the guy in the side of the head and knock him out of the chair onto the floor. Then they'd pick him back up and sit him back in the chair and start asking him questions again. They were beating this guy to a pulp with this phone book, and they kept asking him question after question. About the fourth or fifth time that the light bulb goes on, the guy breaks and says, "No, I didn't kill anybody, but me and Joe Blow, my friend, we got the body out of this apartment for another individual and were paid to throw it into the dumpster." So now we have this guy on disposing of a body. But more importantly, we know who his accomplice was, and most important, we know where the body came from. And we can follow up leads on was it a homicide or what the motive and the cause of death were. So the police most definitely can lie to you, and they most definitely will lie when they don't have enough evidence on their own. Now, this particular person was never prosecuted because it was more important to have their testimony against the bigger fish, the person who had paid him to dispose of the body, and who ultimately was charged with manslaughter. The case, what it really was this guy was shooting up heroin. He bought heroin from another person. That person gave him the heroin, and the purchaser, the deceased, said, "Can I go in the bathroom and shoot up before I go?" Went in the bathroom, shot up, OD'd. And we ended up prosecuting the person, who was a female, by the way, for selling him the heroin, because heroin is an inherently dangerous substance that the general public knows could cause death. And I pitched that to a jury, and they came back with a manslaughter charge. And the person did 5 years for that, for just selling one bundle, which is 10 little baggies of heroin. The person shot up however many bags they did, and it was either too potent or cut with something, or whatever the reason was, they died of an accidental overdose, and still were able to prosecute the person for manslaughter. But the suspect that we had at the table with the lights, he was more important to the police, to the prosecution, as a witness than he ever would have been as a defendant for disposing of a body. Nobody gave a fuck about that. So, can the evidence that a suspect gives against him or herself be used by the police? Most definitely it can. If he had, when the lights switched on, if he had go, "Oh shit, I fucking killed the guy," you don't think that they're going to stick that up his ass and prosecute him for that? Absolutely, they are, I was, we were. Okay? The evidence that you give against yourself can and will, as they say, be used against you in a court of law. So you have to remember that. And I'm going to make another video all about if you should talk to the police and self-incrimination and Miranda and all that. But you need to know, first and foremost, that the police can lie to you. They can use whatever evidence they get from their lies against you. But in many jurisdictions, particularly the federal jurisdiction, if you lie to an FBI agent, you can be prosecuted for that. So I can't tell you the law in every state in the country, because different states have different laws regarding that. But the feds have a statute under the U.S. Code that prohibits you from lying to the police, just like they have one that prohibits you from lying to Congress. And you've seen people prosecuted for those things before. So you have to be very careful. They're encouraged, they're trained, not only to tell if you or the suspect is lying, but on how to lie themselves to benefit their case. That's all they're interested in doing. They want to get a case, and they want to get it with doing as little work as possible. And you can't do less work if your evidence is a confession. And the confession is the best kind of evidence that there is. Takes all the other evidence, goes out the window once you have a confession. No matter what you have leading up to that point, if the defendant confesses, it's the icing on the cake. It's a slam dunk. It's going to be a plea. It won't even be a trial. So there you have it. And I gave you the answer from all sides of the system. That's the name of this channel. And you'll get all the information I get via story, via examples, via what the law is from every single side of the system, only because that's where I was, on every side of the system. So I would encourage you to subscribe, to smash the like button, to leave me some comments. Tell me what you thought of this video. Even if you hate it, like it, subscribe, and write some comments. I don't care if they tell me I'm an idiot, okay? Lots of people think I am. You have to spend all the money I did on law school and then get pinched and go to prison for 51 months and flush all that education and all that money that went into that education down the toilet. So from one idiot to another, be safe.